A piercing scream echoed across the darkened mountain pass as the monk Ananda collapsed onto the gravel. His trembling hands clutched the last letter from his brother, a letter delivered too late. He passed peacefully, the courier had said. But Ananda's breath caught in his chest like a blade. He had left home seeking enlightenment, vowing to return with wisdom to heal their broken family. Now, it was too late. Wind howled through the trees like restless spirits. The pages fluttered in his grip, the ink smudged with tears and rain. Ananda whispered, "I was supposed to save him." Years of silence, years of distance, now sealed forever by death. The weight of unspoken apologies crushed his chest. That night, as rain fell like falling ash, he sat beside a dying fire and felt something fracture inside. Not just grief, but shame, regret, and a deafening sense of failure. In that moment, he did not seek peace. He welcomed despair. Before he was Ananda the monk, he was Anand, an elder brother with a promise. His younger sibling, Ravi, was born frail but bright-eyed, clinging to Anand's every word. "I'll come back with answers," Anand once said, pressing his forehead to Ravi's as the boy coughed through tears. He left that village with fire in his chest and guilt already whispering in his ears. Years passed in monasteries, temples, and silence. Letters came fewer and fewer. Every mantra, every meditation circle, every bow to a statue. Anand had buried his worry beneath rituals. But now, beneath the storm, that old name returned. Not Ananda, the seeker of peace, but Anand, the boy who left someone behind, a brother who ran from fear disguised as duty. That name haunted his bones, echoing in every drop that touched his skin. What if the search for peace was just another form of running away? Ananda remembered Ravi's laughter. It was shrill, beautiful, like wind chimes in monsoon season. He remembered the way Ravi would tug at his robe, asking about the stars, the soul, and death. "Will I get better?" Ravi once asked, eyes bright and scared. Ananda had only smiled. "I'll find the answer." That was the lie he clung to. And now, there would be no more questions, no more tugging fingers, no more shared rice by the temple door. He had found teachings, sutras, and stillness. But the boy with the brightest soul he ever knew had died alone. Ananda wept not just for Ravi, but for the child he once was. The boy who thought wisdom could wait. That family could wait. The worst pain was not death. It was silence where love once lived. Now, in this broken hour, the teachings came back to him, not as comfort, but as echoes. Attachment is the root of suffering, his master had said. But how do you not attach to blood, to the brother who once laughed until he coughed? How do you let go of what shaped your very heart? The rain slapped his skin like penance. The path ahead blurred under weeping skies. He did not feel peace. He felt naked, like the scriptures had burned away, leaving only the boy, the brother, the liar. That was when he whispered, "Teachings mean nothing if they cannot hold grief." The forest stood silent, ancient. Even the wind had quieted, as if nature itself waited to hear what he'd say next. Beneath the hollow sky he knelt once more, but not in prayer. This was not devotion. It was surrender. Ananda let the mud stain his knees, let the grief crack his back. "I failed him," he said aloud, "to no one, to everyone." The words rang truer than any mantra. There was no need for incense, no chants, no lotus pose. This was the temple of truth, built on sorrow, regret, and the memory of a boy who had waited too long. His body shook with each breath, not from cold, but from finally being real. No more silence. No more hiding behind stillness. Only the storm, and a brother's name repeated like prayer. "Ravi, Ravi, forgive me." And somehow, in that moment of collapse, the path ahead began to appear, not as a road to peace, but as a road through pain. In the days that followed, Ananda walked without aim. Villages came and went like ghosts. People offered food, shelter, blessings, but he barely spoke. The robes still clung to his frame, but the weight of the saffron felt like chains. His eyes, once calm, now carried storms. He wandered not toward a destination but away from everything. One evening, he passed a shrine. A young girl bowed to a statue of the Buddha with such reverence, such hope it stopped him. He watched her whisper wishes to the stone, hands pressed in prayer. She turned, smiled, and said, "He always listens when you cry from your heart." Ananda said nothing. His heart wasn't crying. It was burning. He walked on. That smile haunted him. Was she innocent, or had she just not yet been broken? He envied her, but he also feared her hope. He returned briefly to the monastery where his journey began. The chants echoed through marble halls. Candles flickered in silent discipline. Brothers bowed, eyes closed in stillness. But Ananda could no longer kneel. He walked those corridors like a stranger. In the meditation chamber, he sat but heard nothing but Ravi's laugh, and cough, and silence. A young novice approached him gently. "Master, your breath is uneven," the boy said. Ananda looked at him and whispered, "I am no master." The boy bowed and walked away. But that sentence lingered in the chamber like incense, sweet and bitter. Even the Buddha statue before him felt cold, stone eyes watching, unmoved. Ananda bowed once, not to the statue but to his own brokenness, and left before dawn. Before leaving the monastery, Ananda visited the oldest monk, the one who had once shaved his head, and whispered, "This is the beginning of forgetting the self." The old man looked at him now, eyes like mirrors. "You carry weight," the master said. "But not all weight is yours." Ananda asked, "Is regret not my own doing?" The master smiled, weary. "Regret is a tether. Wisdom is the knife." They sat for a while, silent. Then the master leaned in. "But you still see wisdom as escape. That is why it fails you." Ananda bowed deeply, forehead to the floor. The elder said, "If your pain has a voice, let it speak. That is where your path begins, not where it ends." For the first time in days, Ananda felt something shift. Not peace, but clarity. On his way down the monastery steps, Ananda passed a group of monks laughing gently around a meal. He paused, watching their ease. A younger version of himself had once laughed like that, before teachings turned heavy, before loss clung to his skin like damp cloth. One monk offered him rice, eyes shining with simplicity. Ananda took it, but his hands trembled. "Thank you," he muttered. He sat, ate, and wept silently between bites. The rice was plain, but it tasted like home. Not the idea of home, but the memory. Ravi feeding birds on the rooftop, their mother grinding herbs, a warmth that lived in the air. Tears fell into the bowl, and no one said a word. No judgment, no preaching, just presence. And in that silence, the mask cracked just enough to let breath return. That night, alone in a small village hut offered by a farmer, Ananda stared into a small lamp's flame. "Regret is a tether. Wisdom is the knife," he repeated. The words circled like moths. Could he sever the past? Or would the scar remain? He took Ravi's last letter from beneath his robe and read it once more. "Don't carry my pain. You were always my peace." Ananda trembled. Peace? He felt like a storm. But maybe, just maybe, Ravi had seen something in him he could not see in himself. Not perfection, but presence. He whispered, "Then let me try to be that again." Outside, the wind softened. The lamp's flame stood steady. For the first time, he closed his eyes not to escape, but to listen. Ananda journeyed deeper into the hills, guided by instinct more than reason. He reached a forgotten temple, overgrown, silent, and broken. No monks, no chants, only moss-covered stone and faded murals. Inside, an altar remained, though time had worn its edges. On the wall behind it was a painting of the Buddha, not serene, but weeping. Ananda froze. He had never seen such a depiction. Pain, not peace, etched into divine features. He whispered, even he knew sorrow. And suddenly, it wasn't shameful to hurt. His suffering wasn't a flaw to fix. It was sacred. The silence in that crumbling temple wasn't empty. It was full of permission. To break. To bleed. To breathe through pain instead of around it. Behind the altar, Ananda found a hidden prayer scroll tucked between stones. It wasn't ancient. It was Ravi's handwriting. Somehow in his final year, Ravi had come here. The note read, "Anand, I followed your path, not to be wise, but to feel close to you." Ananda collapsed onto his knees. His brother hadn't been angry. He had sought connection. All this time, Ananda believed he abandoned Ravi, but Ravi had chased his spirit through the hills, through teachings, through love. And now, this place was not just sacred, it was shared. A temple built on sorrow had become a bridge of grace. Ananda kissed the parchment, holding it like a heartbeat. "You were always ahead of me," he whispered. He stared into a still pool near the temple, the scroll pressed to his chest. His reflection rippled as wind passed. For the first time he didn't see the monk or the seeker. He saw a man, flawed, grieving, human. And in that gaze, something lifted. Not because the pain was gone, but because it was finally seen. Not hidden behind robes or rituals, but accepted. His eyes were his brother's. His breath carried two names now, Ananda and Anand. Peace wasn't the absence of sorrow. It was the embrace of both presence and loss. He whispered, "I am whole, even with this wound." And the forest seemed to nod with quiet approval. He took a piece of charcoal from his bag and returned to the inner temple wall. Beneath the weeping Buddha he wrote, "Pain is not failure. Grief is not weakness. This is the beginning." His hand trembled, but the words felt honest, raw, free. He didn't write to teach. He wrote to remember. For himself. For Ravi. For anyone who found the temple and needed to know they weren't broken by suffering. That healing didn't mean erasing scars. It meant holding them with love. The mural, once faded, now held a voice beneath it. Ananda stepped back and bowed, not to the Buddha, but to the boy he once was. The one who didn't know how to hold pain, until now. At dawn, mist clung to the leaves as Ananda stepped out of the temple. He did not rush. Every footstep was intentional. He no longer walked to escape or chase. He walked to live. The scroll tucked safely inside his robe. The silence followed, but now it walked beside him, not behind him. Birds called softly through the trees. A single sunbeam pierced the clouds and landed across his path. He stopped, smiled gently, and whispered, "I hear you, Ravi." No longer broken, no longer whole, simply becoming. The hills echoed with nothing but wind, and it was enough. The path led Ananda to a sacred cremation ground, a place where bodies returned to ash, and monks meditated on impermanence. The air was thick with incense and smoke. A funeral pyre smoldered in the distance. Ananda sat near the ashes of someone unnamed, feeling the heat still radiating from the ground. This was the end for all things, kings, beggars, monks, brothers. The illusion of control, identity, even grief, all burned here. He took a handful of ash and let it fall through his fingers. "We cling to names," he whispered, "but even names become dust." His heart beat loudly, in the silence. He bowed deeply, not to mourn, but to surrender. He did not fear death. He feared never living truthfully. And here, facing flame and decay, truth became inescapable. That night, under a canopy of stars, Ananda dreamt he stood before himself, a younger version, the boy who had left home. The boy stared at him with pain and wonder. "Why did you leave me?" he asked. Ananda replied, "I thought wisdom could save us." The boy said, "It didn't." Ananda dropped to his knees. "No," he confessed, "but it brought me back to you." The boy touched his shoulder and smiled faintly. "Then take me with you this time." When Ananda awoke, his eyes were wet. It wasn't just a dream, it was reunion. The fragmented self, the lost child, the burdened monk, at last they sat in the same body. He was not alone anymore. Not fractured. Not hiding. The journey hadn't been to find peace, but to find himself. At dawn, beside the river, Ananda placed an extra robe, the one Ravi had sent long ago, into a small ceremonial fire. He didn't do it to forget. He did it to honor. Flames danced around the cloth, curling it inward. As it burned, he recited softly, not clinging, not denying. Smoke rose like a final offering, not to a god, but to a brother, a wound, a memory that would always remain, but no longer rule. The act wasn't abandonment. It was release. The grief was still his, but it no longer defined his path. He could carry Ravi in his breath, not in his burden. And that changed everything. Even the river seemed to hush, as if bowing to the moment. Later that evening, alone beneath a bodhi tree, Ananda sat cross-legged and trembled. He wasn't cold. He was shedding. 1,000 voices, teachers, doubts, fears, fell silent. Only one remained, his own. "I am still learning," he said aloud, voice cracking. "I am still afraid." And instead of resisting it, he let the fear stay. Let it sit beside him like an old friend. He inhaled, exhaled. No chant, no mantra, just breath, just truth. For the first time, he wasn't trying to be peaceful. He was just being. And that was enough. He wept, not in sorrow, but in surrender. Not in weakness, but in courage. The tree above swayed gently, as if listening. There was no light beam, no enlightenment. Just a man, finally at peace with not having all the answers. When the wind picked up again, it didn't feel cold. It felt like breath, like the world was exhaling with him. Ananda opened his eyes slowly. He didn't rise. He simply smiled. "I thought peace was freedom from pain," he murmured, "but it's walking through it without hiding." Around him, the forest pulsed with life. Branches creaked, birds stirred, leaves danced. The stillness he once feared had become his companion. The emptiness he fled now cradled him like sky. He felt Ravi there, not in voice or vision, but in presence. And in that presence, there was no goodbye. Only this, a breath shared across time. And with that, Ananda stood, not enlightened, not awakened, but real, whole, and walking forward. Ananda returned to his village after many years. It hadn't changed much. Dusty roads, small thatched homes, smoke curling from early morning fires. Children ran barefoot across paths he once knew. He passed the tree where Ravi used to sit and feed birds. It stood larger now, roots deeper, as if it had been waiting. He knelt beside it and placed a stone wrapped in cloth beneath its trunk. Inside, the final ashes of Ravi's last letter. "You belong here," Ananda whispered. Not in grief, not in guilt, but in soil, in song, in something growing. He didn't expect anyone to notice, but a bird landed nearby and sang, just once. That was enough. It didn't feel like ending. It felt like continuation. Some villagers recognized him. "Anand?" they asked, unsure whether to smile or bow. He responded with neither. Just a soft nod and kind eyes. The healer, now blind, touched his face and wept. "You left a boy," she said. "You return a man who's seen ghosts." Ananda smiled faintly. "They taught me to listen." There were no long explanations, no teachings shared. Just presence. He helped draw water, mended a fence, sat in silence with old neighbors. Not as a monk above them, as one of them. Wisdom didn't speak. It helped carry buckets, lit fires, and mourned silently. In that shared ordinariness, something sacred stirred. Life didn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. It just had to be lived honestly. One morning, Ananda sat outside a small hut, with a begging bowl in his lap. A young boy approached shyly, holding a handful of rice. "Is it enough?" the boy asked. Ananda smiled. "More than enough." The boy placed the rice in the bowl, and a bird landed nearby, tilting its head. "He likes you," the boy said. Ananda looked up. The bird had Ravi's softness, the way it hopped, unafraid, curious. It stayed a moment, then flew. The boy watched in awe, but Ananda simply nodded. "Sometimes they visit," he whispered. Not every sign needed understanding. Some were just gifts, wrapped in breath and silence. And sometimes that was more powerful than truth itself. That night, Ananda sat alone beneath a sky full of stars. No fire, no chants, no thoughts demanding answers, just silence. And in that silence, he heard the most extraordinary sound, the sound of no sound. The absence of urgency, the space between grief and peace, the breath between memory and moment. He whispered to the sky, "I am not who I was, but I carry him, not as a burden, but as a thread woven through time." He closed his eyes. No tears came, only a steady inhale, a release, a truth that didn't need to be spoken. The stars above blinked gently, like distant witnesses who had always known. With dawn came mist and a winding trail through the hills. Ananda didn't look back. Not out of coldness, but clarity. The road behind was walked. The road ahead was waiting. He stepped slowly, barefoot, feeling the earth, the morning chill, the pulse beneath each stone. No destination. Just breath. Just movement. Somewhere, someone might call him Master. He would gently correct them. Just a man walking. And so he did. Step by step. Carrying no answers. Only presence. And in that presence, peace walked too. Quiet. Unremarkable. Beautiful. Like a brother's memory. Like sunrise through fog. Like life, honest and whole, beneath the feet. Ananda arrived at a small monastery nestled among flowering cliffs. He didn't announce himself. He didn't wear titles. The monks offered him tea, and he accepted with a bow. No one asked for teachings. They simply sat in stillness beside him. Ananda watched a bee hover near a jasmine bloom. It didn't question the petal or its purpose. It landed, drank, and left. That was enough. One of the novices finally spoke. "Do you ever miss your brother?" Ananda looked up gently. "He never left," he replied. "He just changed shape." The novice tilted his head, confused, but said nothing. There are answers meant not to be understood, but felt. The jasmine scent filled the air like breath after sorrow. During the evening meal, a monk recited an old sutra on suffering. As he spoke, Ananda's mind did not wander. It rested. He had heard those verses before, years ago with Ravi at his side, both listening with hungry eyes. Back then, he had tried to understand every word. Now he let them flow over him like rain on leaves. Not grasping, just receiving. Wisdom wasn't something to conquer. It was something to soften into. One monk glanced at him and asked, "Do you agree?" Ananda didn't respond with an answer. He simply touched his chest, where Ravi's scroll was folded close. That was his truth. Not loud, not impressive, but real. That night, as stars shimmered above the monastery roof, Ananda heard laughter, pure, high, ringing like temple bells. For a moment, he thought it was Ravi, but it was just children chasing fireflies beyond the gate. Still, his heart did not ache. It smiled. Memory had become music, not mourning. He walked to the edge of the grounds, watched the lights blink in the children's hands, and whispered, "Thank you." not to the past, but to the now, to the fireflies, to the wind, to his own heartbeat, which still pulsed despite everything. Not because pain was gone, but because joy had learned to share the room. A group of travelers arrived, asking for teachings. They had heard of Ananda. They wanted lessons, wisdom, enlightenment. He smiled. "There's nothing I can teach you," he said, "that your suffering won't already show you." Some were confused. Others, offended. But one woman wept quietly and whispered, "Thank you," because she understood. Ananda wasn't there to impress. He was there to reflect, to remind them that grief is not the opposite of peace. It is its path. He placed his palm on the stone wall behind him and said, "Everything passes, but not everything fades." The stone was warm from sunlight. He left his hand there a little longer, listening. As dawn broke on the final morning, Ananda walked beyond the monastery toward the edge of the cliff. Below, clouds rolled like oceans. He sat, alone, without ritual. Just a man with air in his lungs, wind in his robes, and a name echoing through his bones. "Ravi," he whispered one last time, not as plea, not as apology, but as song. Then, silence followed. Not the silence of loss, but the silence of fullness, of completion. He didn't move for hours. He didn't need to. The world breathed, and so did he. And in that breath was everything: grief, joy, memory, release. No need for one final thought. Just presence. Just now. Just this. Ananda walked through a forest path shrouded in golden mist. There was no destination, just footsteps. His robes swayed with the rhythm of breath. Each step was a prayer, not spoken but lived. As he passed through shafts of light and shadow, he felt something new, not freedom from pain, but friendship with it. Worry no longer stalked him like a predator. It walked beside him, quiet and observed. He no longer tried to silence the past. He simply carried it gently. The birds called from above, and he smiled, not because life was perfect, but because it no longer needed to be. Peace wasn't a prize he'd won. It was a companion he'd stopped rejecting. At a resting place beneath a banyan tree, Ananda sat and watched ants carry leaves across the earth. The smallest acts of life moved with purpose. Nothing rushed, yet everything changed. He smiled at their silence. No sermons. No ceremonies. Just doing, just being. A young monk passed by and bowed. "Master, are you meditating?" Ananda opened his eyes slowly. "No," he said. "I'm remembering how to live." That sentence hung in the air like incense, rising, curling, lingering. The monk didn't ask for more. He sat beside him in quiet. And so they remained, 2 generations, one silence, breathing beneath the same sky. In the monastery's quiet library, Ananda took out a blank scroll. He stared at it, quill in hand. He thought of writing to Ravi, one last time. But as he dipped the pen into ink, he paused. The words he wanted to say, "I miss you, I forgive you, forgive you, forgive me," were already living in his breath, his walk, his stillness. He placed the pen down and rolled the scroll back up. Some truths didn't need to be written. Some healing was not in words, but in the silence that came after the words stopped trying. He smiled. The letter was complete before it even began. As dusk fell, a final group gathered around Ananda beneath the open sky. No one asked questions. They waited. Ananda looked at each face, young, old, eager, broken. He raised his hand not to instruct, but to offer a single truth. "You will hurt," he said. "You will lose. You will love. Let all of it in. That is the path." A hush fell. Not because of the words, but because of how softly they landed. They weren't commands. They were permission. Permission to feel. To break. Heightened. To begin again. No one clapped. No one bowed. They just stayed, breathing. As if the silence that followed was louder than the teaching itself. Ananda sat alone once more beneath the stars. This time, not in mourning, not in search, simply being. The world no longer pulled at him. It rested with him. His eyes closed, his spine straight, his palms open. The sky stretched wide and endless above. He inhaled deeply, and with his final whisper of the night, said, "Peace is not the absence of sorrow. It is the space where sorrow and love sit hand in hand without needing to be healed." And with that, silence took its rightful place, not as an end, but as the truest companion of a heart that had finally let go. The wind moved softly. The stars blinked once more. The breath continued,